Assalamu alaikum. This is our first lecture from the series of lectures on complex analysis. Before starting the analysis of complex numbers, it is compulsory to need to know that how the complex numbers came into being, how we traveled from natural numbers to up to know that we know about complex numbers. So the lecture 1 is named as the journey of numbers from naturals to complex numbers. The question is, where do the numbers came from? Why we need all different kind of numbers that we have, the naturals, the whole numbers, the integers, the rationals, the irrationals, the reals, and the complex numbers. Why we need these numbers, these different kind of numbers? So we will answer these questions in a short while. Before that, let's imagine a word without numbers, a word with no numbers. Think, how would you live in such a world? How would you know how many people are in your family and how much food you need for the day? These questions are baseless without numbers. There will be no time, no dates, no counting, no calendars, no prices, no clocks, and no planning without numbers. So, uh, how people survived at that time when there were no numbers? How was the life without counting numbers? So, what people do, we have the stories like a famous story of an ancient herdsman. He counts his sheep by matching stones to his sheep. He matches each stone to a sheep and calculates that all his sheep are back safely. If there are as many stones as there are sheep, then he has the surety that all his sheep are back safely. Similarly, if you have to count apples, one apple means another way using fingers. One apple means one finger up, two apple means two fingers up, and so on. So the people counted using fingers or by placing stones, sticks, or knots. As there were no symbols, no digits, and in short, there was no mathematics. Can you imagine how the barter system worked at that time? At that time, trade was done without prices. There were no rupees, no coins, no rates. The method that was used was, I'll give you three apples if you give me one loaf of bread. But who decided if that was a fair deal? So, what were the problems at that time? There was no weight system, no standard values, only disputes and confusions. People survived with these methods, even, but this method worked only in small tribes. As people traveled, settled, and grew crops or livestock, trade grew complicated. There was a need for standard measurement. So, there was a need to count, to measure, to track time, and to plan. So, actually, need gave birth to numbers. People tried to figure out how we should symbolize the numbers, that we can use a standard notations. So there are different notations in the earlier systems, the vertical strokes or bars and etc. These are written, some are written here. Different civilizations invented their own symbols for numbers, but those systems of notations have their own limitations. They were discarded as being inadequate with the advancement of society. Ultimately, the set of numerals called Hindu Arabic numerals, as we know that today, as standard set of numbers, were accepted as the set of counting of or natural numbers. Now the question emerges, was these numbers were adequate to solve all the problems? The answer is yes, for a long time, but not for always. The problems emerges. what notation will represent the concept of nothingness? Yeah. So there was a need to uh, invent a symbol that represents nothing, the symbol zero. And you can see it parallel to for the need to solve algebraic equations. There emerges an equation like x plus 2 is equal to 2 that has no solution in natural numbers. So there was a need to invent the zero, and the set of whole numbers came into being. So again, there emerges an equation like um, x plus 4 is equal to 2. Then it was the time for the introduction of such numbers that should be negative, that represents loss or debt. So the integers, the set of integers came into being. But again, the integers were not sufficient for a lot of purposes. For example, if one want to share the apple in two brothers as half apple, so what was the symbol for the notation of half or quarter? Or in other words, if you need to solve the equation like this, 2x minus 1 is equal to 0, this equation has no solution in both naturals, whole, and integers, and the set of integers. So we need to invent the rational numbers. But then again, even these were not enough to take into account everything. For example, one cannot solve the equation like this with using the set of rational numbers. So, to fix that, we invented real numbers that involves the rational and both irrational in it. But the process of evolution of numbers isn't stopped there. Although the real numbers was a vast set of numbers that apparently looks like that it is sufficient to solve every type of problem with such numbers. But there comes another equation that has no solution in R. The equation like this, x squared plus 1 is equal to 0. So the need to solve the equation give birth to numbers whose square is negative. For example, square root of minus 1, square root of minus 2. That mathematicians call imaginary numbers. So um, all such numbers are involved in a new set known as the set of complex numbers. See, that involves all the imaginary numbers. So each number such number that takes place, solved a problem, and each problem shaped the world. So, the story of numbers is actually the story of human progress. Now, the question is, will there ever exist an equation whose solution may not be a complex number? That uh, the journey of numbers stopped up to there? The answer is given by the fundamental theorem of algebra that says any polynomial with complex coefficients will always have complex roots. So, till now, the story of numbers stopped there. The complex numbers is solving everything very finely.